Welcome back, my friends. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Tim, just glad to be with you on our journey through the Bible, one day at a time in this year. Our reading for today was in First Thessalonians chapter 1 to 5, the entire book. You probably noticed as you read through this book how many times Paul mentions the second coming of Christ. Apparently, there was great interest in this church, and they had a lot of questions about this. That's one of the reasons why this epistle is so helpful. But I'd like to consider today a verse that was a surprise to me. Maybe it was to you too while you were reading this. First Thessalonians 2:18. We read, "Wherefore we would have come unto you, even I, Paul, once and again, but Satan hindered us." Really? Paul? I heard one expert say that to defeat the devil, what you need to do is find the highest spot in your city, stand there and rebuke the devil. And then there are a lot of people running around claiming to bind Satan, and yet he seems to be good at getting free because the next Sunday they have to do the same thing all over again. This is not a joke, though. We do have an enemy, and it's good to understand him. And this is one of those passages that may help when we see that Paul was hindered by Satan. Paul and Silas wanted to visit this church, but they couldn't do it because of that. There was the desire that was there. Paul and Silas wanted to visit. It's been a very short time in this city. 3 Sabbath days, less than a month, Paul was there. And the result was the whole city was in an uproar, Acts 17:10, and they had to leave the city. They went on to Berea from there. They were not prevented by God's will, though. There were times when that happened, when Paul was ready to move on, and yet God prevented him from going the direction that he wanted to go. This is not one of those times. He made it clear it's Satan that kept them out of this city. So why should the devil take so much interest in keeping these three preachers from that particular city? I mean, here he is, the master of evil, the prince of the power of the air. He's watching the journey of these humble preachers, apparently more concerned about their movements than he was about uh, the leaders of the day, Nero or Tiberius. Well, the truth is, they were a greater threat to him. Our enemy hates the preaching of the gospel. He hates Christian fellowship. It's his policy to keep us apart and divide us. And if Paul was able to go into the city, the believers and Paul could find encouragement and strength and power from being together. No, the devil does not want that. And for you, if you've been faithful to the Lord, you can expect an attack from the enemy. Sometimes Satan uses imitation to hinder the work of Christ. You remember in the Old Testament, Aaron and his sons were designated by God as priests. And so what happened? Korah, Dathan, and Abiram showed up with their own censers. They were ready to start their own priesthood, an imitation priesthood. And of course, they were saying, all the Lord's people are holy. Can't you imagine the people behind them saying, yeah, we're all holy? So how does Satan hinder Christians? I'll give you a few examples. You may be prompted to speak to someone, but then you get an unexpected phone call and all of a sudden the opportunity is gone. You may have thought to yourself, I should give to a mission project, and then thought of other ways you could spend the money that would be a lot more fun. Somebody may be thinking to himself, I'm like Paul. I could have been rich, but Satan hindered me. Don't believe it. I think he'd much rather have Christians in places where pride could do them in. So how can we tell? Well, look at the purpose of the hindrance. If anything has happened to you that would prevent holiness or humility, that's your enemy who's at work. Look at the method of the hindrance. God uses good methods and Satan bad ones. If your hindrance has been a bad thought, a bad doctrine, or bad motives, that didn't come from God. Look at the nature of the hindrance. Whenever an impediment is useful in pleasing or gratifying your flesh, consider that as a hindrance from the enemy. Or look at the timing. Sometimes that's a factor. Hindrances to prayer, for example. You're in church, the service is coming to an end, the pastor is beginning to make his appeal, you close your eyes to pray, and then you start wondering, if Elmer's is going to be crowded today, let me suggest it may not be the Holy Spirit who put that thought in your head. But suppose you do have hindrances that come your way. They're from the enemy, they're from Satan. What do you do then? I'll give you 3 suggestions. Number 1, continue on in the direction that God has shown you to go. And he may open that door after all. And secondly, rejoice, because you don't want the devil as a friend anyway. Remember that God always wins. How about this example of Paul? Now, yes, Satan succeeded in keeping Paul out of Thessalonica. Can't you imagine the devil and the demons all rejoicing, giving each other high fives? Yeah, we kept Paul out of that city. And as a result, we have this wonderful letter that has blessed the church ever since. And finally, remember, you have a promise. Resist the devil, and he shall flee from you. You don't need to flee. Make him flee. Well, consider these things today. Will you meditate on them and stay in the Word? Keep reading. Our reading for tomorrow is in 2 Thessalonians 1-3. Read there, and I'll be glad to be back with you again very soon. Have a great day, folks.